This is Money Moves on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Money Moves, VSiN, the Sports Betting Network, Sirius XM Channel 158, alongside Jonathan Von Tobel, Stormy Buonantony with you. We're live in downtown Las Vegas, Circa Resort and Casino. Coming up this hour in about 15 minutes, we'll dive into some of the potential teaser options on the NFL card. Also, a deep dive into some injuries you're going to want to know about as it pertains to Week 2. Best bets at the end of the hour, but we're going to kick things off talking with our good buddy Matt Youmans, who joins us here on the Progressive Guest Line, host of VSiN Primetime, weekdays 7 to 11 Eastern, and of course the Friday Football Invitational on Friday nights at Matt Youmans 247. And Matt, you were on the air last night during the Bears-Vikings Monday night game. I know we're going to focus mostly on college football here, but I was curious what you thought of J.J. McCarthy there in the fourth quarter and how maybe your initial preseason thoughts got wrapped up into what you saw last night.
Well, I played the Vikings over their win total and the Bears under, so I was happy with that result last night. But I'm a big Kevin O'Connell fan. I think he's really, really good. You look at what he did with Sam Darnold last season, and I like J.J. McCarthy better as a quarterback. He's more athletic. He can get outside the pocket and make some plays. And he made some big-time throws last night, too. I know there were plenty of Twitter critics who were piling on, saying he was a bust and he sucked, through the first half or into the third quarter. But those Twitter critics don't know anything about football. I think J.J. is going to be just fine. And Kevin O'Connell's a guy I trust with quarterbacks. So the Vikings are a really good team around him, by the way. He doesn't have to be Superman for them to win games. And Vikings probably headed towards 10 wins or more. That's a really tough division. The only team I don't think has a shot would be pretty obvious would be the Bears. But again, I liked a lot of what I saw last night. I thought the play calling by O'Connell was not great in the first half. And they opened it up and let J.J. throw the ball down the field a little bit more in the second half, especially in the fourth quarter. And that made the difference in the game. As far as Caleb Williams, he got off to a really good start. And I thought regressed greatly from there. Missed some wide open throws, had some bad reads. I still think it's going to be a struggle, pretty much a roller coaster ride most of the season for Ben Johnson with Caleb Williams, trying to get him to run the offense the way he wants. The Bears are a decent team. I don't think they're any better than an 8-9 team.
All right, Matt, before we get to college, Circa Friday Football Invitational, we have a lot of fans who love the program every Friday night. We have 1 week in the books. Who would you say you think is your favorite? There's a lot of fan-made odds, but you're the guy who runs this thing. And are any of them the 4 handicappers that use the Dolphins in week 1?
Well, I tell you, the Dolphins were a pretty bad play. Let's put it that way. If you're a tout and you give out the Dolphins to your paying clients, you need to offer some refunds. Let's put it that way. That's pretty embarrassing side to be on there because the Colts are not Super Bowl contenders, but the Dolphins made them look like that. Talk to the Iceman Edel, the defending champ, 5-2 with the best bet winner out of the gate. He's tied for the lead with the team of Frank Betty and Anthony Curtis. And if you don't know much about Frank B and AC, they're 2 of the sharpest gamblers in the world, not just sports bettors, 2 of the sharpest gamblers. And these guys are going to be in the hunt the entire way. I knew when I put them in the field, they were going to contend to win. And they're 5-2 with the best bet winner right off the bat. We've got, let's see, I think 5 handicappers at 4-3, including Chris the Bear Felica, a former winner of this contest. And only 7 of the 25 handicappers over 500 after 1 week. But again, that's a little misleading because we've got 13 guys, or 13 total. Alex White, she's in there too. We have 13 handicappers at 3 and 4. And 1 who got off that really poor start, Tony Gordon, former Circa Million champ from 2021. He went 0-7. I'll tell you what, I talked to Tony this morning, and he's got a great attitude about it. He just lost a bunch of coin flip games, and that's what happens in the NFL. And you lose games like the Seahawks, Falcons, Ravens, things like that. That's going to happen. At least you're not giving out the Dolphins as your best bet. So we got 25 handicappers, strongest field we've ever had, every Friday night from 4 to 7 p.m., and $30,000 of Derek Stevens money up for grabs. And Steve Fezzik is going to be in studio with me at 4 p.m. Pacific Friday night to kick off week number 2.
Again, Matt Youmans, Friday Football Invitational, host of VSiN Primetime, joining us here on the Progressive Guest Line. And listen, these early season games can be a little bit challenging at times because we have all these ideas of what a team is going to be in the offseason. We talk about them for so long. But now that we're finally getting some data points, in college football specifically, were there any teams that when you looked at this week, you feel like I have a good read on this team and you placed a bet early on?
Well, I haven't. I put a couple bets in last night, but I don't love this card at all. In fact, week one, I loved the card and didn't do real well. Last week, I didn't like the card that much and had a great week. So we'll see how this one turns out. I'll probably end up with 5 or 6 plays, which is far fewer than I typically have. But no, I think you're still handicapping these teams as a fluid situation. You got to watch and learn as much as you possibly can, and that learning process continues at least through the first month into the second month. There's just a lot to figure out. I never bought the hype on Clemson, which I'm glad. I did buy into the hype on Arch Manning, which I was a little bit wrong about that. LSU was a team I did buy the hype on. I never bought it on Florida. I don't like Sunbelt Billy Napier as a coach, and he was up to his old tricks again last week with clock and game mismanagement. Florida had 11 penalties in that game for over 100 yards. And falls to South Florida as an 18-point favorite. I'm going to come back with Florida. I might regret this because I hate betting on Sunbelt Billy. But I think Florida is a better team than it showed last week. All those mistakes. A lot of times you want to bet on a pretty good team off a bad loss. And that's a bad one. And by the way, Florida's schedule coming up. Stormy, I know you cover a lot of SEC. This Gators schedule coming up at LSU, at Miami, home against Texas, at Texas A&M. This is brutal. And the Gators right now still in pretty good shape physically. They don't have a bunch of injuries. LSU is 2-0 out of the gate, but that 23-7 win over Louisiana Tech, a sleepy spot off the big win at Clemson, is understandable. But again, Garrett Nussmeier is not off to a great start. He's got 2 TD passes in 2 games. Running game has been a little subpar for the Tigers. 20 points per game the LSU offense is averaging so far. I feel like this line's inflated. There's 9.5 out there at a bunch of books. These two teams hate each other. These teams hate each other more than Jonathan Von Tobel and George Riley Panagakis. I'm going to take the underdog and all the points here.
I don't hate anybody, but that's all right. Hate's a strong word. Let me ask you this. Because we need to talk about – yeah, it is a strong word. We need to talk about real football. My cohort here will be on what I believe is the game of the weekend when Cal takes on Minnesota.
Yeah,
what do we make of what this is going to be? This should be a banger in real life. What do you make of it?
I'm envious of Stormy. She's going to be up in Berkeley, and I think this is going to be a hell of a game Saturday night. Last week I was really looking forward to that Arizona State-Mississippi State game too. On the Bulldogs, and boy, we had some hijinks at the end of that game. This is going to be one of those back-and-forth type of games I'm really looking forward to. Now, I was on Cal in week 1 at Oregon State. Big reason why is I like this quarterback, Jaron Kiwi Sagapatelli, and I think I pronounced that right. Stormy,
did not.
Can you tell me if that's correct?
Jaron Kiave Sangapulatele. But I appreciated the effort so much, Matt.
Yeah, I tried. You know what? I didn't get to watch the first game on TV. I was just trying that pronunciation, and I thought I was somewhat close. Anyway, 6'3", 225-pound freshman from Hawaii. Yeah. He was a 4 or 5-star recruit, depending on where you look. So far, he's got 69% completions. He had 3 TDs against Oregon State. And by the way, I like this Cal coaching staff. Justin Wilcox, his offensive coordinator is Brian Harsin, former Boise coach. I just don't know what to make of Minnesota at this point. Drake Lindsey, the new quarterback, is only completing 61% of his passes. Darius Taylor, the stud back, has got an injury. I think it's a hamstring injury. Not even sure if he's going to play. PJ Fleck's been kind of secretive about it. After the win against Buffalo, which is not all that impressive, in Northwestern State, I thought this should be a pick'em game or even make Cal a slight favorite here. So I took Cal plus 2.5 because I don't think that number is going to go to 3.
Yeah, we're seeing mostly ones out there now, so it is moving in that direction. And your point on Taylor is well taken because just watching through it, it didn't look good on him. I know that PJ Fleck said they're hopeful, and they'll take it day by day, and they'll figure it out. But we'll see if he actually gives us any insight tomorrow when we have our call ultimately with them. But I like what you said about Cal and their coaching staff, because in addition to Harsin, too, Nick Rolovich, former Hawaii head coach, and everything, that he has a connection with Jaron as well. Last thing before we let you go, Georgia-Tennessee, big game of the week. We've seen a 3-point move in this one. Georgia down to just 3.5-point favorites. What'd you make of it?
Well, Joey Aguilar is off to a good start as a Tennessee quarterback, but again, it's against cupcake opposition, weak defenses, and I don't know what you make of Tennessee at this point. I do know Georgia had a disappointing performance against Austin Peay last week, and Gunnar Stockton, Nate Frazier, still a couple of players I believe in, a quarterback and a running back there. I don't know. JVT, I'll throw this at you because you're probably looking at this game as well. Is this going to drop to 3, and is this a buy low spot on Georgia here? Because I think the market is really dropped on Georgia off the first 2 games. But I think if you can get a 3, I think you have to lay it with the Bulldogs here.
That's what we talked about earlier. I think if it does, that's probably the way to go. And I think the injuries that we're looking at for both teams, Matt, the more impactful ones are on Tennessee's side than it would be for Georgia, I think.
Yeah, it looks that way. And I know the Georgia performance against Austin Peay was unimpressive. But, again, that game was interrupted by thunderstorms. I think lightning had about a 2-hour delay. I'm not going to make too much of that. And a lot of times you just got to look at the number too. And I think if the 3 pops up, it's mostly 3. It's all 3.5 across the board right now. If I lay 3 on Georgia, I think I have to do that this week.
Matt, I appreciate your insight. Thanks for doing this.
You bet. Thanks.
Matt Youmans. Make sure you check him out. VSiN primetime, 7 to 11 Eastern, weekdays here on the network. And, of course, the Friday Football Invitational. We mentioned Friday nights beginning at 7 Eastern. We're going to step aside. When we come back, actually a little bit more reaction real quickly to that Cal-Minnesota game and looking into some teaser options on the NFL card. Stick around. More Money Moves after this.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
EdgeBoost is the first ever bank account built for bettors, ensuring all gambling transactions are approved. If you haven't checked them out, you should. No usage fees, no minimums. You get cashback rewards and 100% approval for any and all betting deposits. Sign up today at edgeboost.bet and use our promo code MONEY. When you do deposit $25, EdgeBoost will match that deposit for you. Again, edgeboost.bet, and use the code MONEY, as in Money Moves. We are Money Moves on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network, SiriusXM, Channel 158, YouTube TV, the VSiN Watch app. He's Jonathan Von Tobel. I'm Stormy Buonantony. I did want to follow up on one quick note just about that Cal-Minnesota game that is coming up. Cal's best defensive player got ejected for targeting in the third quarter of last week's game, so he will miss the first half of this game against Minnesota, for what it's worth. Just wanted to make sure I pointed that out. A lot of other things do point Cal for a lot of people, and I understand why, but that was at least one negative for them coming into the game. It was funny listening to PJ Fleck's press conference this week, too, just talking about the time zone difference, because it's a really late game for people that are used to being body clock central time zone. Kicks off at 9:30 in their brains, be done before 1 a.m.
Come on, you're fine.
I mean, I'm a sleeper, so get your nap schedule down.
Yeah, how do you handle that?
What do you mean?
I mean, you're like you said, how do you handle these?
I'm very tired. I get made fun of constantly for how much I yawn. It's sad.
Really?
Yeah, because I usually go to sleep around the time that we're like in the second quarter.
Dude, you go to sleep at
during the week.
Sleep at like 8 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm like not 8 o'clock.
You're an
Come
old
on,
person.
I'm a 9:30 though. I'm a 9:30. So second half is usually my bedtime. I'm in bed on a day-to-day basis. Let's shift gears and get into some more NFL though, because there are a couple teaser options this week. We talked about how last week...
Almost literally just a couple.
Yeah, there's 3. Well, from a Wong teaser perspective, there are other names. And so that's what I was going to say. You can tease whatever you want
in life, yes.
You can tease whatever you want. There's also a handful that still go through key numbers, but it's more the 7 and the 10 than it is the 3 and the 7. So do with that what you will. Last week, though, week 1, teasers were very successful if you were going with the standard way. I know you and I both had a couple of them in pocket that came through, although admittedly, I was very much so rooting against the Broncos at one point. I was like, I will happily lose this teaser if we knock out 7,000 plus in Survivor, but that didn't come through. But good week for teasers to start.
Yeah, so if you just went like purely Wong teaser, which again is you're getting through the 2 key numbers, last week there was no combination on those closing numbers that you lost with. Eagles from 8 to 2, Broncos from 8.5 to 2.5, Raiders from 2.5 up to 8.5, Seahawks from 2.5 up to 8.5, and then the Bills from 1.5 to 7.5. All of those legs won, no matter, obviously, if they all win, no matter what the combination of teasers that you used in week one, you won. So this week, if you're just going again by strictly the concept of the Wong teaser and getting through those two key numbers, there's not really that many options, as you mentioned. There's 3 that are sitting on the board right now. You can tease up the Patriots from 1.5-point dogs to 7.5 points, Colts from 2 to 8, and the Buccaneers from 2.5 to 8.5. But not many options outside of that. And then you factor in, again, what we've discussed with these teaser prices. If you're actually somewhere where these are still relative, where they're still expensive or they're getting more expensive by the day, which, by the way, you see the value of it to an extent. It's not going to happen every time like that. But when we talk about every combination of a teaser leg winning, you can see why these are getting more expensive. But we'll see if this is going to come to fruition this week, but 3 really only solid options for you right now.
Let's go through each one of these. I think of those 3 that are your traditional ones, the Buccaneers call out to me on that part of the Monday night doubleheader in Houston, taking on the Texans, a Texans team that didn't look great to start the season. And we've been high on the Bucs. You think they're going to be the top seed of the NFC.
Right.
So
1-0, baby.
Bringing that up to the 8.5, I feel like is a good one. But you're obviously an Indianapolis Colts fan. You watched that team very closely. You liked what you saw against Miami, a different test in Denver, but a Broncos team that also didn't look the way that they had been hyped throughout the entirety of the offseason. And Bo Nix did not look good in week 1.
No. Not at all. And I do think that this is going to be a viable teaser leg. Again, you get the low total. You're at 42.5. You can get it up to the key numbers, get to 8.5. It's got it's got all the makings of being a pretty strong teaser leg. Again, if you can find somewhere that charges a price that you find palatable. And you hit on the head. So when I was on with Jensen and Dave this morning, Jensen asked me the question in the frame of, hey, the Colts are stepping up in weight class. When you're talking about this offense going up against now the Denver Broncos, my rebuttal was, but is the defense stepping up in weight class, taking on this Broncos offense, which, as you mentioned, at home, in what we discussed, if you were setting up week 1 scenarios, there's not that many that you would set up in a position where is there a better spot for a home team than being at home with the defense that you had, playing where you're at with your natural home environment and home field advantage against a rookie quarterback, and they still were scuffling the whole time. And Bo Nix did not look good, as you mentioned. I think this Colts team is, again, I think they're a little undervalued. We've discussed this before. We saw a glimpse of that against Miami. So if you feel comfortable like I do in looking at this Colts team from an undervalued standpoint, then for sure getting this up to key numbers is going to be great. I don't think it's going to get to 3. I'd feel somewhat, actually, I think I'd be shocked if this got to a full 3 against Indianapolis, barring any injury news that occurs potentially during the week of practice. Now,
if we look through some maybe more non-traditional ones, what about like the Ravens, for example, who are a double-digit favorite, looking at DraftKings laying 11.5? What if you brought that down to 5.5 against the Cleveland Browns? Or no, because it's a divisional contest?
Yeah, I mean, it's divisional. And what, like, are you really getting any strong value from there? Like you said, maybe like 10 and 7, but those traditionally aren't like what you're looking for getting through. But, I mean, if you're looking around, I was
trying to look at some dogs maybe to tease up to get to double digits.
Sure. You're the Saints against your 49ers?
I mean, honestly, like it depends on what you think about it and the health, but
sure.
I'm probably not going to play it, but I wouldn't hate on anybody that did. You can get the Panthers up from 6.5 to 12.5 if you think that last week was maybe a little bit of an anomaly, or the Cardinals they didn't look awesome either. Yeah. And is Kyler Murray still dealing with a little bit of an illness? Is that still going to bother him a touch? 6.5 to 12.5 there. You can bring the Bears up from 4.5 to 10.5 in Detroit against the Lions after what we saw from Detroit offensively week 1. Like, any of those interest you at all?
No, what interests me is I got to go to a book this Sunday and fill out some, those old school like super mega teasers. Like, those are a ton of fun. I like those. I want to get like a 10-point. Yeah, or like
10-team, 10-point teaser.
Just put one in and let's see what happens. No, I mean,
Bills just to win. You could do there's just a few of those.
Just some ridiculous ones out there. Bills plus 7, things like that. It sucks to kind of poo-poo this, but if you're factoring in the prices that you're actually laying with some of these teasers, some of these shops, and then you go through and you're just kind of getting some of these numbers where, all right, like Panthers from 6.5 to 12.5, I can understand the attraction to something like that, especially somebody who thinks like 7 is somewhat high. I just don't know if that's really worth it. But hey, man, if we're stringing together, like, if we're throwing back some, what are the drinks we were drinking out in Omaha, or the Sun Cruisers or whatever?
Oh, Surfside.
Yeah, if we're throwing back like some Surfsides and we need something, and we just need something, we'll put together like a 16 of these bad boys.
Some of and I love teasers, and I swear by them. But like the cheapest I can find out here is like minus 125 now.
Yeah,
it's gotten ridiculous.
Dude, it goes to
minus 140 is standard for some teasers at books. That's crazy.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, to the point of all this too, there's a couple different ways you can look at it. You can go the poo-poo, like, you can't be doing that. You got to tease through two. Or like you're talking about, which is, I don't know, man. Like, let's just gamble and have some fun. Let's just see what we can do. And let's just see if the Panthers can stay inside of 12.5 against the Cardinals with a couple of other legs that we like here. Which, again.
That's why I like that.
Yeah. On the surface, looking at that and asking the Panthers don't cover 12.5. Come on.
Then it's so
we're definitely over.
Can we go there, though? Do you... Like, what is your evaluation of Carolina right now after week one? Like, when you walked away from that game, what were you thinking?
I mean, I don't really like a ton of what you saw for Bryce Young, and the turnovers were a little worrisome, especially when you're talking about the decision-making, but he wasn't terrible. You don't like 4.4 yards per attempt overall, but I think that there's one of those, it's like we talk about with all these teams through week one. Are you dramatically shifting your opinion on a team after 1 week? I think we've done a pretty good job, and we've talked about every single one of these teams coming out of week one. Have we talked about any of them in the sense of dramatically changing what our preseason priors were after watching them? I think there's a couple of teams you can make the argument, yeah, maybe. If you're high on Houston, for example, and you see the offensive line have its issues, but I don't think you're looking at one data point and saying, all right, this is it. They're cooked. This is now the worst team in the NFL. So I'm going to be pretty stubborn through the first couple of weeks, not changing too much about what I thought about the Carolina Panthers. And this is a much different opportunity, I think, going out there, playing indoors, not having to worry about a lightning delay. Not that really mattered in the grand scheme of things against Jacksonville, against an opponent that I think is much more on your level, considering that I was high in Jacksonville, and they showed every bit of the at least improvements that you could expect from them.
Yeah, I think that I could see myself doing that this week. The legs that I like are Panthers up to 12.5. I like the Bucks up to 8.5, and I like bringing the Bills down to win.
Okay.
And so any combination of those, I feel like I'm probably going to end up doing.
Chris Foley checks in and says Sun Cruisers are better than Surfsides.
False.
I haven't tried the Sun Cruisers.
False.
But those are just...
Sun Cruisers are...
just tea, right?
They're delightful, don't get me wrong, but like slightly sweeter than Surfsides, and so I like the more calm flavor profile that we have on the Surfsides.
I like gummies and not the creatine ones.
Whoa there, Turbo. We'll be right back.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Fake handicappers are everywhere. For the first time, there's a real solution. Juice Reel, the trusted marketplace for buying and selling picks with total transparency. Here's how it works on the Juice Reel app. Every seller syncs their sportsbook account, so their full betting history is imported directly from the book. No screenshots, no false records, no hype. That means the only way to sell picks is to prove you can win, and the only picks you can buy are from verified bettors with real results. The days of inflated profit claims are over on Juice Reel. You can tail proven winners or get paid when others tail you. Download Juice Reel today. That's juice like orange juice, Reel, R-E-E-L, Juice Reel. Download it today. Alongside Jonathan Von Tobel, Stormy Buonantony with you back here on Money Moves. Continuing our NFL talk, there were a lot of injuries coming out of week one. Most notably, I would say the San Francisco 49ers. And we talked about that a little bit earlier in hour one. Reminder, if you do miss any of the show, you can always download Money Moves in podcast form wherever you get your podcasts. But Brock Purdy, questions about his non-throwing shoulder and his toe. Kyle Shanahan said the toe is the more significant of the issues, but did put a little doubt into bettors' minds as to whether or not we're going to see him. That line down to 4.5 against the Saints coming up this week. George Kittle also missing at least the next 4 weeks on injured reserve with a hamstring. And obviously we know the cacophony of injuries that has taken place in the wide receiver room. Fortunately, Christian McCaffrey of all people is healthy though, so there's that.
Yeah, it was not overtly efficient, but at least he made it through the game. So it was one of those where every time, kind of like Stafford, every time you take a hit or anything, I was watching like, okay, how's he getting up? What's going to happen? But You look at what this week's going to bring from an injury standpoint. There's a lot of cluster injury spots that you could really discuss. I think the one, and it's not just because it's alphabetical and on the graphic in front of us, Atlanta is really hurting at the wide receiver position. Darnell Mooney, as we know, was inactive in week 1. Drake London had a shoulder injury in the loss to the Bucs. Jamal Agnew left with a groin injury. They could be without their top 2 guys at wide receiver. They could be without 3 total dudes at the position. When you're talking about a quarterback you're kind of breaking in for the most part, and an offense that didn't do much outside of a 50-yard scamper from Bijan Robinson near the beginning of the game, nothing really in between, and then had some life near the end. This is pretty big for Atlanta, especially now Stormy taking on the Minnesota Vikings. Vikings, sneaky, I think, survivor candidate this week as well to discuss. We know about J.J. McCarthy and the questions potentially. But his defense against a really thin wide receiver core and a quarterback still that has his own small sample size of work at home in an opener like that, that's going to be something worth looking at potentially. But those wide receiver injuries for Atlanta looming large going into this game.
Yeah, Bijan Robinson, your leading receiver in week 1. 100-yard day and a tutty for Bijan. Gosh, I got to get that right. I got to get that right. He made it official.
Yeah.
But
you can do Jerry Chiave Sangapula-Telly.
I can't do Bijan.
You can't go Bijan.
Although I did have some. So how do you say Dijon? Do you say Dijon or do you say Dijon?
I think it's Dijon. I was, Brian Ortega will appreciate this. I was watching a video where apparently it's Denzel Washington.
Yes.
Not Denzel.
Yes, so he says that's his dad. He's like Denzel the second or the third or something. It's a family name, but then I guess there was another person that had a similar name or something. So it was his dad. Yeah, I thought that was cute. So his mom was like, "No, we need to separate the two of you and call you something different." So Denzel, there you go.
Denzel and Denzel.
What'd you just look at it?
All right, what? All right, let's go Cincinnati. This is also pretty big. Wait, what do you got?
I was gonna say because my 2 biggest, and I don't think I'm alone.
Cut me off.
I don't think I'm alone in this, that my 2 biggest issues with Cincinnati are how brutal their defense is and the offensive line not protecting their quarterback. Now with another injury up front, not great.
It's not like there was a drive in which Joe Burrow was sacked on 3 straight plays. I think you're exaggerating a little bit. No, this offensive line stunk. And it's just this thing with Cincinnati where everything that you imagine will be the problem is the problem. Here's the thing, though. Joe Burrow, and I don't know how impactful this is for many people. I think the line move we've seen is not because of a guard being injured. For those who are not watching, guard Lucas Patrick left the game against Cleveland with a concussion. We will see what his status is. I don't know how much you downgrade a team based on an interior alignment of a bad offensive line not being able to play, but it's just worth noting that a bad offensive line is missing a body along that offensive line, which the coach and the people in charge said, you give us our best chance among these 5. So that's not something that's going to be great. Having said that, Burrow is one of those dudes, and maybe this is just a 1-game sample size. He has, I think, been under pressure so much that he knows how to deal with pressure better than others. So, for example, he actually, by PFF standards, had a higher passing grade under pressure than he did when he was kept clean. It's not by much, but still, and I don't think that's going to hold. I think my whole point here, though, is that I think Burrow is not immune, but at least able to deal with a pressure rate that was over 40% in week 1 and will likely be amongst the highest again this year. So I don't know if we're downgrading it too much, but it's worth noting against Jacksonville here that you're going to have an offensive line that could be down 1 starter potentially when you go into battle this week. And again, you're down to a 3.5-point favorite. A lot of spots. You said you saw a 6 on the opener. Some spots opened up at 5.5. Either way, it's heading in Jacksonville's direction because of what we've seen here. And to give Jacksonville some credit, although it's not much, on 40 dropbacks, they pressured Bryce Young like 12 times. It wasn't really a ton. So are they going to be able to do it against this lesser offensive line? Your floor is probably raised against Cincinnati in that regard.
Also, just from a numbers standpoint, we know how brutal the Bengals have been in early season games, and we thought maybe that they would have the LSU effect where they put so much into week 1 that they were going to show up and really have a day. They did not. So do we see the slow start continue is naturally another question. Joe Burrow 2-9 outright, 3-8 ATS in weeks 1 and 2. Jags, meanwhile, were really good in the underdog role last year of 3.5 points or more, 8-3 ATS in those spots, 5-1 with Trevor Lawrence in the starting role. How about the Detroit Lions? So we knew that there was going to be a lot of change with the coordinators. Obviously, your starting center is no more. And what is all of this going to look like? The offense really struggled, only had 6 points going into the last handful of minutes in garbage time. But then defensively, wasn't a great day against a really good offense in Jordan Love and the Packers. Now dinged up even more. So what'd you make of it?
So this is going to be one that is I think of interest for me with Chicago. When you have such a good game planner, the way that Ben Johnson can scheme things up. I was trying to find the graphic again. I couldn't find it. We'll have it for tomorrow. But if you looked at like expected points added in scripted drives versus non-scripted drives, the Bears this week were one of the best teams in those first 15 plays. So again, to the point of, I believe Ben Johnson. I also think that Caleb Williams still has it. This is one of the best defenses he just faced on a Monday night against Minnesota. But now if you look at Terry and Arnold potentially being hurt in this game against Chicago, we don't want to draw a line through Daniel Thomas. He is a backup safety, but just another body in the secondary that just might not be available, especially if you suffer an injury at safety. But the back end and just this defense in general for Detroit is, since the offseason, just taking little hit, and those things start to add up. So now you're laying 5.5 with potentially Terry and Arnold not being available. Again, just keep an eye on these injuries as we get closer to game time. Coming back on Chicago, I think is a pretty interesting proposition as we are looking at the way this injury report breaks down. Similar to the Minnesota Vikings, we should note, obviously a little bit of rest disadvantage coming off a Monday night. This was the big thing for Detroit for the season. Hardest schedule, but big rest advantage in a lot of these games. You have that here against Chicago. But if Terry and Arnold's not going to play against an offense that I think is well schemed, maybe the Bears can have a better offensive performance and be pretty alive here.
The Lions have covered 10 straight games following a loss. It is the longest active streak in the NFL, but will certainly be put to the test coming up this week against the Bears. Any other team injuries that really stood out to you as you went through?
So we've gone through a couple of them already. We should note the Texans, I think, is pretty interesting. Jake Andrews out multiple weeks with high ankle sprain. That is their starting center along an offensive line that's not good. And then here come the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with a pretty good interior presence along their defensive line in Vita Vea. So maybe that's going to be an impactful injury for an offensive line that did not perform well against the Los Angeles Rams. And now you're going to be down a starting center. We've talked a lot about Miami, but for those who maybe weren't with us, who aren't familiar with it, Storm Duck, their starting corner, James Daniels, Austin Jackson, both along the offensive line. All three of these guys injured in this game against Indianapolis, so that's worth pointing out. And I want to go to this and get your thoughts. I talked about this game with Dave and Jensen this morning. Pittsburgh taking on Seattle.
Yeah.
We know, we were going back and forth on Aaron Rodgers yesterday. Let's put that aside really quickly. Deshaun Elliott injured his knee in the win over New York. Joey Porter Jr. has a hamstring issue that caused him to miss the end of the game as well. This Steelers team defensively didn't look great. Justin Fields, by some standards, the second best passer that we just watched over the weekend. Now you get to take on the Seattle Seahawks. I get the Seahawks don't exactly make you think of a dynamic passing attack, but Jackson, Smith, and Jigba look pretty good. Darnold can execute the offense. If you're down a couple of bodies, and all of a sudden, that dink and dunk stuff we saw from Aaron Rodgers, 5 yards average depth of target, all sorts of things, Seattle becomes, I think, a pretty interesting option as well.
Yeah, I think the 3-point spread is probably pretty fair in this spot. The total is one of these things very similar to last week when we looked at the Steelers-Jets and it was 38 and all of the money was coming in on the under. Like, you look at that and it screams under on the surface, but are we going to get, especially with some injuries to the secondary, as you mentioned, like, are we going to get a little bit more points here? Seattle, really good defensively, and we saw that against the 49ers. Are the Steelers going to be any better than we saw them be last week if they're more dinged up? Deshaun Elliott, Joey Porter, all these different things. So that was a total I'm going to stay off of this week. But at first blush, you're like, oh, yeah, that looks like a very clear-cut under game.
Yep.
Probably not.
We should also point out, too, the Packers might be down 2 starting offensive linemen, and they play on Thursday. So that's obviously a tough turnaround, too, against Washington.
All right, we got to step aside here real quickly. You hear that music. When we come back, we're wrapping things up. Best bets of the day and final thoughts. Don't go anywhere. More money moves after this.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
All right, we are wrapping up this Tuesday edition of Money Moves live from downtown Las Vegas Circa Resort and Casino. Stormy Buonantony, Jonathan Von Tobel. That was a nice wave. That was very smooth.
You're welcome.
You said you wanted to ask me something in the commercial break. What's up?
So I am one to be distracted every once in a while, and I was distracted by the internet, and something crossed my desk that I would like to get your thoughts on here. Allegedly, according to FanDuel Sportsbook, the most popular Comeback Player of the Year bets in the last 24 hours. Daniel Jones and J.J. McCarthy. Can either of them win that award? Because, and I'm not asking, can they keep it up? I'm saying, let's assume they put together a profile that is worthy of consideration for comeback
and
player.
the way that they have adjusted it in the last year.
So, I think Daniel Jones, no. I mean, if Sam Darnold couldn't win it last year, then why would Daniel Jones be able to win it?
Sam Darnold still got votes, though.
He did, but he didn't get anywhere near enough to win it.
Because I do think that, and for anyone who isn't aware, Joe Flacco won Comeback Player of the Year 2 years ago, coming off of the couch, basically. And came
back from sucking?
And the argument was, he came back from being bad and not being in the league over a Damar Hamlin, for example, who died and came back to life. And the committee essentially said, voters, listen, we want you to take this award and give you a little bit more parameter around what it's supposed to be and that you are coming back from significant hardship or injury or all of these different things. So that is a fair question. J.J. McCarthy, I think that one's interesting because he didn't play last year, but he is coming back from injury, but he's never played in the NFL.
Yeah, so how
literal do you take the rule?
Yeah. That
or the guidance. And again, it's not a rule, it's just a guidance point.
And for a refresher, for those who don't remember, Joe Burrow won last year. He had 31 first-place votes. J.K. Dobbins finished in second. Darnold finished in third. So it seemed that there was an adherence by the voters to follow what the guidance was very strongly. So I would think that eliminates Daniel Jones. The McCarthy thing is interesting because just like you mentioned, can you come back despite not playing a regular season snap in your career before this year?
I think that they would if he had a masterful year and he wasn't, and it was, okay, let me correct this. Even if it wasn't a masterful year, if he had a really good year, but it wasn't, like he can't win Rookie of the Year. So maybe that's their way of making good on something like that, because I could see that happening. And I told you earlier this summer, I actually didn't hate the concept of taking a shot on Daniel Jones for Comeback Player of the Year, just in case we're a couple years removed from that guidance point that has been given to voters. What if they don't take it that seriously and there's not somebody who has an outstanding season? Like, let's say Christian McCaffrey gets hurt again, or Aiden Hutchinson isn't what everyone thinks he's going to be, right? If there's not somebody that comes back from a significant injury and has a good season, but Danny Dimes comes out here and balls out and is winning all of these games, could that change the mentality if he has a Sam Darnold-like resurgence? Yeah. So voters are human at the end of the day. So I always come back to that. Like, just because you tell them to do something, they're still going to do whatever they want to do sometimes.
Yep. Last year there was they were towing the company line last year, but I'm curious to see what this year is.
Yeah, I don't know if that's something that's going to last forever.
And again, this exercise is the assumption that both put together a profile that is worthy of consideration, not the question of can Daniel Jones keep it up or can J.J. McCarthy do it. So we will see if that.
Well, what's your answer to that question?
I mean, I think McCarthy is more of a viable option than Daniel Jones if I'm going by last year's standards. I think that's, again, I don't know if I really buy it with McCarthy just because, again, he's never played in the NFL. But at least there is an injury that you're coming back from. And the AP just wants this. They should relabel it. They just want it to be comeback from injury award. They don't want it to be come back from, being awful award.
Yeah. All right, let's get into our best bets to close out the program. We add a couple things to the portfolio for the weekend. Best bets, as always, presented by G-Bank, the official bank of VSiN. And G-Bank is built with bettors in mind, ladies and gentlemen. Right now, you can earn $50 in cashback rewards once you're approved and your account is open with a G-Bank Visa Signature card. And while most credit cards treat sportsbook and gaming transactions as cash advances, even when it's your own money, G-Bank treats them as regular purchases. So no cash advance fees. Saves you 3 to 5% on every deposit right there. Plus, you get 1% cash back on all eligible and sportsbook and gaming transactions, 2% cash back on anything else you buy. VSiN.com/GBank is where you can apply and get more information. That's VSIN.com/GBank. And you have a couple college football ads. Talk me through this Arkansas State play first.
Yes. Sorry. Really quickly.
Oh, did we get some news?
No, I was just double checking because somebody did ask. Paul Nelson asked, isn't J.J. McCarthy in the Rookie of the Year pool? I don't know if the NFL is the same as like a Major League Baseball or NBA. I don't believe that to be the case, but I don't want to confirm anything that I don't officially know.
Okay.
So I was distracted by trying to find that. All right. You said Arkansas State. So so situationally, at 21.5, Iowa State's played so much football, right? They've played 4 weeks of football, 2 of them really big spots. We've seen them play the game in Ireland against Kansas State. They're coming off of the very gritty win over Iowa, which is always destined to be, 16-13 every single time. Just situationally for Iowa State, to go on the road and lay this big number. Now, again, they blitzed the spot coming back from Ireland against South Dakota, but going on a true road spot against an opponent like Arkansas State, with conference play kind of looming for the Cyclones, I feel like this is, the market really jumped in on the situation for Iowa State, or the negative one at that, in week 2. I think, to me, this is where I'll dip my toe in the water of the situational play. You have the bye on the other side, too, so that tempting, like, okay, hey, man, let's just check in on our last day of work on a Friday, and let's get out of here before our vacation starts. Not that it's full vacation, but just a really, I think, much-needed bye for Iowa State after playing some really high-level football for 4 weeks. I just think that going into a true road spot like Arkansas State, that's a tough situation to be in, as opposed to just coming back home and playing host to South Dakota. So at 21.5, so 21 in the hook, figured it was worth taking a shot on that, so I added Arkansas State.
So I had a similar mindset with a big underdog, just one that I think is maybe a little bit too much. Oregon State plus 24, taking on Texas Tech. And listen, I know it hasn't looked good for Oregon State these first couple weeks, and I was on the sideline for their opener when they hosted Cal and got dogged by the true freshman quarterback 34-15. They then followed that up with a loss to Fresno State. But I think defensively, this team is more capable than we've seen to this point. And Texas Tech, for as dominant as they look through 2 games, it's also against Arkansas, Pine Bluff, and Kent State. So Malik Murphy also, I think, once he gets more acclimated to the offense, there's all these different layers to things that need to get figured out. And maybe over the first couple weeks, it's a numbers game at the end of the day. And I feel like 24 is just inflated a little bit too much. And yeah, shout out Gil. Shop around, though, because they're still 23.5, but as low as 22.5. So do your due diligence and try to find the best number that you can. And maybe this keeps bopping around. But I think that those points are going to get taken up because Oregon State's better than they've shown so far. And Texas Tech, I think, is just a little bit overvalued in the market for what they are.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that actually goes hand in hand with what I'm looking at with, Utah against Wyoming. We discussed this earlier, but Utah having to go to Laramie to take on a lowly team like Wyoming, I think you want to get off to a strong start and then sit back and get your guys not ready, obviously, in that game against Wyoming, but have them rested and ready to go as much as you possibly can for this game against Texas Tech coming up in the next week. So I thought first half minus 13.5, especially with it's underneath that 14 mark. I think that's the way to go. We saw that it didn't work out, but we saw that the Florida first half was a very popular angle against South Florida because, again, the similar situation. You got LSU on the horizon. You got a lowly team like South Florida. Get off to the good start, build up the lead, and then you can get guys out of there that you think are vital for you in the next week. So 13.5 first half for Utah. Hopefully, don't get my teeth kicked in like this last week. 1-5 last week, and 6-10 on the season for college football.
This
last week was not great.
Yeah, these early season college football games I'm not the biggest fan of. That said, another one that we're adding here is Georgia minus 3.5 at Tennessee. I felt like that move was just too much. I think that because of the performance against Austin Peay, and I don't like these rain delay games where you're thrown off by 2 hours and you look uncharacteristic than you would, and you're probably not trying to do too much or show too much when you know the game that you have coming up as well. Plus, if Georgia does ultimately get those offensive linemen back, I know you looked at some of the quotes from Kirby Smart and said it didn't sound good, but I kind of took it as more optimistic, honestly, that they seem hopeful and that there might be a chance that they get those 2 guys back to solidify the right side of the offensive line. I like Georgia. I think that is it's just too low.
I'm with you. We talked about Matt. We'll sit back and see if it waits to get to 3, but from the college football contest, I think that's a viable leg. Georgia against Tennessee.
Yeah. Okay. Again, Best Bets presented, as always, by G-Bank, the official bank of VSiN. What do you have going on the rest of the day?
Nothing. I wanted to read this to you.
Sure.
Absolutely nothing. I just unplug and turn off for until the next show.
And I'll see you tomorrow morning. You're like a robot.
Brad Powers. This is a great tweet. If you got in front of every 3-point or more move in the FBS versus FBS market sides totals, you are 47-37, 56% this year. If you faded every 3-point or more move in the FBS versus FBS market right before kickoff, you are 49-34-1, 59% this year. So in other words, if you've been playing both sides of those and middling those suckers, you are making out like a bandit.
Wow,
how about that?
Look at that. Also, real quickly, as we go to break, apparently after the 49ers waived Jake Moody earlier today, they're bringing in veteran kicker Eddie Pinheiro for a workout. Yep. So maybe that will be the solution because Lord knows, Moody has made me moody.
I'm sure that's a good one. I'm sure a kicker that is available at this point of the year is totally.
Anything would be better. Signed him off the street.
Nico Iamaleava.
God, get it together, man. That's a wrap for us. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out. We'll be back same time, same place. Mitch and Polly coming up after this.